As I've been involved with various activities over the last few weeks, particularly the Advent service for the Key Stage 2 children at Grimley, and then the Christingle at Hallow last Sunday afternoon, I've been talking about the wow factor, and I find that such an incredible concept, actually, particularly as we approach Christmas and we think about the event which had the greatest wow factor in history, the birth of Jesus Christ. And I think it's a beautiful way of communicating to all ages, actually, the effects that belief in Jesus can have. It's just an absolute wow moment. And as we consider the journey of the Magi today in the last of these reflections in Advent, I hope and pray that we'll all be wowed by what we see and what we hear in faith. I remember when I was a little boy, my nan telling me about a neighbour of hers who on a Christmas day afternoon used to say, "Well, it's as far away now as it ever was." And I used to think as a little boy, oh, how sad that you should feel like that about Christmas. And yet I think that for a lot of people, that's exactly how it feels, that it comes and it goes and that's it. But actually, we know as believers that it's really just the beginning, but that what we're celebrating is the beginning of the impact that the birth of that baby had on humankind. And as we consider the Magi today and their response to finding the child, I think that has a very powerful message for us, and it's one about worship, actually. Let's look at the verse, or two verses, that Matthew has in his Gospel. It's Matthew chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, and it says this: "On entering the house," so this is beyond the stable now, right? We're in the house. Note that. "They saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road." Now, Matthew is quite interested in the word worship, actually, which is what we see the Magi doing here. They're worshipping this child. And it's interesting that he uses the word worship 13 times in his Gospel. John uses it 9 times. Luke uses it 3 times. And Mark uses it twice. The only other New Testament book to use the term worship anymore is Revelation, and it's mentioned 24 times in Revelation. Now, what we interpret from that is that Matthew places great emphasis on worship. And I think there's a message for us about worship from this scene that we've just had described to us about the Magi and how they worshipped. We're told that they knelt down and paid him homage. And as we look at crib scenes and pictures from Christmas cards and famous works of art, we will normally see the Magi either bowing down or kneeling. And there's something very important about this kneeling posture. Because in kneeling, you actually become vulnerable. You're actually giving away your power. You can't run away when you're kneeling. Have you noticed that? If you're kneeling, it's very difficult to get up and get going. I actually speak as someone who doesn't find it particularly easy to kneel. For a few years now, I had problems with my hips and my knees, and my knees start to play up if I spend too much time on them kneeling. But actually, I think I've got to get over that, because there's something about the posture of kneeling that is very, very important for us as believers. I just was thinking earlier as I was preparing to share this reflection that that the kneelers are not used much in churches, are they? I speak as someone who rarely uses a kneeler, and yet here's one of my New Year's resolutions, if you like. I'm going to practice the use of a kneeler, because there's something about acknowledging God's power and presence when we kneel. And as we kneel, God raises us up. I read once that a person is never as tall as when they bow. And I still think the same principle applies to kneeling, actually. So as we come to the end of Advent, and as we approach Christmas, I think I want to encourage us all to contemplate kneeling in the presence of God. You know, as the Magi knelt down, they learned a new truth about Herod. They learned that he was after them. There was a dream, wasn't there? We're told, having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. In Christ, they'd met God. They'd seen his truth. They presented their gifts, and they knew in their hearts they were never going to be the same again. But the result of that was that they got up from their kneeling and they took a different road. And it strikes me that if we really want to enter into worship of God, if as we head into Christmas and we head into the new year, that we want to experience God in new and fresh ways in our worship, we might need to learn how to kneel. Amen.